laughed at my husband in front of our friends, and he got up and did something none of us expected. I do not know exactly what I'll do to get my marriage back on the right track, and it's all my fault. I shouldn't have said what I said. In fact, I shouldn't have even cheated on my husband in the first place. I need your advice, guys. I think I have ruined my chances of getting back with my husband because, believe me, I've tried different means, but they're just not working, and I really need another alternative to work with. I cannot afford to lose Dan, really. Hello, Reddit. My name is Joanne. I'm 32 years old, and I've been married for 8 years now, but now I think I'm about to lose my marriage.
Never.
Well, the thing that happened was that while laughing with my friends, I told my husband he has a pathetic tool, but then the vibe shifted. I honestly didn't know he'd take it that way, though. I honestly was just joking, and I actually just wanted the best for him, but he had taken it so seriously and had just tried to walk out. I went after him, and he had turned around and told me he wanted a divorce. When I tried to tell him I was only joking, he had ignored that and shouted at me right in front of my friends and our family, and had asked if it was because his tool was pathetic. That's why I felt it right to cheat on him. You see, I didn't exactly plan to cheat on my husband. I mean, I love him. That's why I married him. But I guess during the course of our marriage, I must have taken my husband for granted for too long. I met my husband Dan at an opening party that was hosted by my mother and organized by me to celebrate the opening of her new store. I had been so exhausted running around preparing for the perfect party for my mom because she did deserve it. My parents, especially my mom, had sacrificed quite a lot for us, her kids, and I felt she deserved every bit of the enjoyment she had. My sisters and I had built her a fashion mall knowing that my mom had always loved fashion. I mean, it showed really well in us, her children. She was always using us as experiments for new styles she had created in her head. I have 2 sisters, an elder one and a younger one. My younger sister, Madeline, was the one who followed in my mother's footsteps and became a fashionista. Caroline, my older sister, was always the serious career woman among us, and she had become a successful lawyer, while I had become an artist. At first, my parents had opposed my dreams because they felt artists usually ended up being junkies in the street, but all I wanted badly was just to paint and let people see the world through my paintings. My parents decided to give me 2 years to have a go at my dream, but under the condition that if I didn't hit it big, I was to go look for a job and do something else other than art. I had been so confident and had agreed, thinking that 2 years was a long time and I was going to get it. But I tried for the whole 2 years after college to sell some of my paintings to big and well-known museums. They refused because they wanted to buy paintings from well-known artists, and I was none of that. Eventually, I got tired of trying and had to get a job since I lost the bet with my parents. The job was actually quite interesting because I got a job as an editor, and soon enough, my dreams were just mild dreams, and I was hitting it big as an editor. So, my sisters and I, as I said earlier, decided to build a small store for my mother to achieve her lifelong dreams, as she no longer had to take care of us or sacrifice anything for us anymore. My mom had been so surprised and cried really hard the day we made the big reveal, so we eventually planned to have an opening party, and I was put in charge of making sure everything went fine as Caroline had a big case she had to prepare for, and Madeline was busy touring the world, but they both were to show up for the party. I hadn't known that setting up a party, however small, was that stressful, because some vendors delivering stuff would sometimes just cancel or have a delay or something, and I had to sort for another one. By the time it was for the party, I had been pretty exhausted and just wanted to run away. But it had all been worth it, as the radiant smiles on my mom's face just satisfied me greatly. So when the evening was coming to an end, I had tried to escape to the balcony to rest my aching feet from running around all day in high heels. Dan had apparently followed me and started to make small talk with me. He had apparently been invited by his aunt, whom he was staying with for his short visit, and his aunt was actually a friend of my mother's. He praised me for organizing the party, and I had relished the praise. We introduced ourselves and then spoke for a little while more before Madeline had come to call me back into the party to come take pictures with our parents, so I had excused myself. That night, I had found my thoughts wandering to Dan and thinking back to our conversation. I had regretted not collecting his contact, but I had hoped that I would maybe run into him another day, and that day came soon. The following week, while I had been running errands for the company I worked for, I had bumped into Dan and had been pleasantly surprised to see him. I couldn't wait around for small talk, but this time I ensured we exchanged contacts. We started talking from then on. We spoke a lot and got to find out more about each other. Dan is actually a woodworker. I mean, he had a way of looking at wood and knowing exactly what to build with it. He had amazing skill, and that, according to him, his parents had opposed bitterly to the line of work he chose, but he had been equally stubborn and went ahead with it anyway. It made me envy him because I had given up even before the 2 years deadline my parents gave me was up. Dan was literally an amazing guy who was able to multitask and get things done, even things that weren't exactly in his line of work, and I admired that very much about him. We started dating within a month of meeting, and within 6 months, Dan had asked me to marry him, and I had agreed. But my parents had opposed it slightly when I told them that Dan and I had decided to get married. They thought it was too early in our relationship to be getting married, but I had gotten really upset. And when Mom tried to talk to me afterward, I had asked how many months she dated my dad for, and that had kept her quiet about it. You see, my parents met each other and they had such strong chemistry, so within a week of meeting, they began dating and then got married within 2 months of dating. Mom had always told my siblings and me all about hers and Dad's love story. It was almost like a rhyme we could recite. I had always wanted the kind of love my parents had, and Dan gave me exactly that. He was almost like Dad, too. Stubborn, romantic, and spoke very few words. And they were also strong believers that actions spoke louder than words. My parents had no choice but to give in when I maintained my decision to marry Dan. Dan and I had gotten married in a local church my parents attended, and we had only friends and family around to witness our love. A year into our marriage, Dan had bought a house for us and had worked on some things alone and refused to let me see, saying it was a surprise. When it had been time for us to move in, Dan had taken me into one part of the house and called it my workspace. I had been surprised, thinking he meant it as a place where I could edit my work without having to stay late at the office trying to do just that, but I had seen the different brushes and materials, and I remember how happy I had been. Dan had told me that day that he wanted to support my dream, and that if I wanted to quit my job and chase after my dreams, even if it took years, he would be there to support me. And he was really there, like he had promised. I quit my day job, and I started painting again. This time with a lot of confidence because I had the support I had always wanted from the beginning. I painted for another 2 years before I was recognized by a new museum in town. They were featuring the paintings of rookie artists, and I had presented my paintings, and they had bought it right away. I had been so happy, and when I told Dan about it, he had been so happy for me too. After the museum had bought one of my paintings and it was featured, a lot of people loved it, and people started asking about the artist, and so I was given the opportunity to actually present most of my paintings in the museum, and that is how I got my fame in the art world. I started getting invited to parties, to award nights. I was even given 3 medals 2 years in a row as an uprising artist, and whose work was sold the highest. I was getting very recognized, and I loved the attention and fame, and I think I got too carried away by it. Soon enough, I started to ignore Dan. I could travel out of the country to go feature my work, and I wouldn't come back home for a week, weeks, and sometimes a month, whenever I had to go on a tour. At first, when I started traveling to showcase my works, I would beg my agents to let my husband come with me, but they would tell me then that my husband wasn't the star, I was, and taking him along would definitely make him feel inferior to me. I would feel bad and try talking to Dan about it, but he would dismiss it and say he would be back home waiting for me with my favorite food whenever I came back. It made me love him more back then. But we had our first fight when my agent decided that I needed a bigger workshop and that they wanted to build a workshop outside my home for me instead of the place Dan had built for it. They thought it bad for my reputation if I still worked in a small room already stocked with different artworks that I had been working on and hadn't finished. I had agreed with them and decided to tell Dan about it, but only after my new workshop was ready, and I only had to move in. Dan had been upset because I never informed him beforehand about the big decision I made, and that I regarded the place he had created for me as rubbish after I got my fame. I had been upset too and had lashed out. Back then, I thought he was just being jealous that I was making it big time, and I had told him exactly that. His response? I didn't exactly wait to hear it because I left the house that day and did not sleep at home. The next day, I came back with a moving truck to pick up my artworks. You know, the more painful thing I did that day was that I only picked up my artworks. All the brushes and materials that Dan had first bought me to work with, I left them. I had felt they were useless and outdated, that I could just get another one if I chose to. Dan apologized to me the next day when I still hadn't come home and had told me to come back home, and I did. But from then on, Dan said nothing about the workshop again, and stupid me was feeling happy that he finally got the memo. One time, my agent decided to throw me a party. The party was supposed to give people yet again a small feel of the newest works and have them anticipate them when they were finally done, so I was supposed to reveal 2 of my unfinished works and have people already bidding to buy them before they were out. It had been a great idea, but the party was a 1+1 party, and that meant I had to go with someone too, even though I was literally the host of the party. I had told Dan 2 days before the event, and he had been surprised because I was only telling him about it that late. I gave him silly excuses, bought him a suit and shoes, and also took him to a hair salon without listening to any of his protests about just having a haircut and having enough suits at home to choose from. The day of the party came, and I literally forgot about Dan and was having fun with my friends. Oh, by the way, I don't think I've mentioned them through the course of this story. My friends were Sonia and Biggie. Her real name is actually Tessa, but we called her that because she was rather on the big side, and we did call her that because she chose the nickname herself, so it wasn't meant to be a demeaning nickname or anything like that. They were my college friends, and we worked together when I worked as an editor, but even after I quit, we kept in touch and continued to be friends. When Sonia had eventually tapped me to go back to my husband, who was looking so out of place, I had looked over at the side of the room where he stayed and had just turned again to continue my discussion. Later during the party, Dan had walked up to me and told me he was retiring early for the night because he had some woodwork to deliver the next day. But I had gotten angry at him and was about to say that when one of my biggest clients walked over to me and started to talk about how excited he was for my next work. Then he looked over at Dan and had asked for an introduction, and I had introduced Dan as my husband, and my client had replied with an "oh," and without accepting Dan's handshake, he had continued telling me he wanted to get in the highest bid for my work when it was finished. When Dan slipped away beside me and away from the party, I didn't even know. I only noticed he was gone when the night had ended. When I got home that night, I had heard him working in the basement, and I had just taken a shower and slept off. The next morning, when I had woken up, Dan had gone out of the house, and he left me breakfast and a note to tell me he had to deliver work to a client and wished me congratulations on the success of my party. After breakfast, I went out with my friends on a spa date. There they told me they did not like the way I had treated Dan at the party, and then they had also said Dan was obviously a good husband to me, and that I should make it up to him so I wouldn't lose him eventually, and I had dismissed their worries as nothing, and I had changed the topic. A few months after the party, I decided to buy a bigger and better house to suit my taste, and not only because of that. I was to be interviewed at my house and asked about how my dream started, and I felt like the house Dan bought was never going to suit my new fame. So, I had bought the house and only told Dan after I bought it. Dan had been so upset and had sworn that he was never going to move with me, and that I could suit myself if I wanted to live separately from my husband. Dan had never gotten that angry before, and also he never swore, so I knew he was stubbornly serious about his decision, and that upset me. So I had no choice but to put the house back on the market for sale and use the house we lived in for the interview. But then that interview went viral, and I became even more famous. Because I was asked about my first workshop, and I had shown them where I worked that my husband had built me, and they had asked why we never moved, and I had told them that I, of course, didn't want to upset my husband because it was his house we should definitely live in. That had gotten people's attention, and I was regarded as a loyal and humble wife who, despite her fame, was still in love with her husband and didn't want to make him feel inferior. Well, one part was true, and the other wasn't. I mean, I did love my husband, but I just wasn't the loyal and humble wife they spoke about. Another thing that went on online was the slandering of Dan's name. He was regarded as a bad husband who didn't want his wife to progress, and he was also pointed out for never having shown up at most of the parties I went to. So, it made it all the more reason that he was jealous of my achievements. If Dan saw anything about the interview and his sudden negative fame, he never said anything about it, and I also ignored it too, and I never corrected the public opinion about my husband. On our 7th anniversary, when Dan had planned a surprise for us to at least make up for the bumps and misunderstandings we've been having over the years, I wasn't there. I mean, it wasn't exactly my fault. I had promised Dan I would be there, and I had intended to be there, but 2 days prior to that day, I had been told by my agents that I had been invited to tutor some art students for 2 weeks on how to achieve better painting, and I was to be paid very handsomely. My agent had discussed the benefits of going, and they had been so tempting that I gave way. I traveled without telling Dan where I was going and skipped out on our 7th anniversary plans. When I got to the art college, I was introduced to their tutor and also the students. I tutored them for a week, but of course with the help of their tutor, Joel. Joel was actually fascinating to work with because of how much insight he had on art and how much of it he had to say. We spent a lot of time together, even after the daily lectures, and we would discuss, argue, and agree in some instances on things about art. Now it makes me wonder, with all his knowledge about art, why exactly he hadn't become famous. But then I was so stupid to think that it was just a luck thing. He showed me some of his work, and he had obviously seen most of my work online, so I taught him some basic styles to use while painting to achieve bolder and better paintings. He looked at me adoringly, and I loved the attention and the way he looked at me like I was the painting myself and not what I was drawing. He distracted me easily, and it made me uneasy. I was glad and disappointed when the 2 weeks finally ended, and I had to go back home. The night before I went back home, Joel had come to my hotel room with an offering of champagne to celebrate the end of a successful 2 weeks of tutoring. I had been so tempted, but then I refused. I didn't want to be alone with him in the room, especially because my sexual hormones were quite heightened that night, seeing that I was close to my menstrual flow. At times like that, I have always been with Dan, and he was the one always comforting me and holding me, and of course, having sex with me, and I guess I also took that for granted. But Joel had sounded so convincing that he just wanted to have a glass with me and then he would leave, just to celebrate and thank me for the opportunity to learn. I eventually accepted and allowed him in. That was the third biggest mistake of my life, and the second was actually allowing him to stay until midnight and finishing up the bottle of champagne instead of the 1 glass promised. And the first was actually having sex with him. He had leaned in and kissed me, and I hadn't even resisted, and we had ended up having sex. The next morning I woke up panicking, and Joel had, of course, apologized for the night and promised me that no one would find out about it, as it was also a one-time thing. I had relaxed, thinking I could trust him, but Joel was apparently a snake. After I had gone back home and tried to make it up to Dan for missing our anniversary, he had forgiven me, and we had moved past that. Then Dan had suggested we start to prepare for kids since we were getting older, and I had agreed. We started visiting fertility clinics to see if we were fertile enough to have kids. I remembered then that I was panicking when we first went to the hospital because I had had sex with Joel while I was ovulating, and I forgot to take the morning after pill because I was rushing to get to the airport and away from the sin I had just committed. But I knew refusing to go with my husband to the fertility clinic would upset him, and I didn't want that. I guess it was kind of my way of making up to him for sleeping with someone else and cheating on our marriage, even though he obviously didn't know that. We were tested and were both healthy, and I confirmed secretly that I wasn't carrying any baby. I was so relieved because that would have made everything so complicated. I was happy that that meant I got to live the life I lived without fear. But well, I guess life had other plans, or should I say, the life called Joel had other plans. 2 months later, Joel showed up at my workshop, and he told me he was on a month's leave and wanted to come see me because he missed me. I panicked and started to think of ways to get rid of him, but Joel didn't make that easy for me. He kept showing up at my workshop, and one time he even showed up at my home. Luckily, Dan hadn't been around as he had gone to get some woodwork delivered to his clients. Joel kissed me, and when I resisted, he continued until he had me compliant. We had sex right there in my husband's home, right on our couch. After the sex, Joel grinned satisfactorily and left, leaving me feeling like shit. I sat on that couch for probably hours, thinking about my actions, and it wasn't until I heard Dan drive in that I quickly put on my clothes and rearranged the cushion pillows that were discarded carelessly in our rushed attempts to get each other naked. I quickly went into the shower to get rid of Joel's scent on me, and I threw my clothes into the washing machine. Dan had been surprised because he knew I hardly took 2 showers unless I had gone out, but he knew I was home all day, so he asked, and I lied that I just felt icky and decided to shower again. Dan believed me, of course, and went to the kitchen to plate the food he bought us. I felt so guilty after the second time Joel and I had sex, and I knew I was going to get into trouble soon if I did not end things with him. Believe me, I tried verbally to end things with Joel, but it felt like my body had a mind of its own and was only ever activated when Joel touched me. I kept sleeping with Joel, and this time it was at my workshop, not at my house. I made sure he understood the rule never to come to my house again, and he did follow that rule. A month passed, and Joel still didn't go back. Whenever I asked, he'd silence me with a kiss or sex. So eventually I stopped asking. This went on for almost 3 months, until all of a sudden Joel just disappeared. I was worried at first, and visited his rented apartment when he didn't show up as we had planned that day, but I was told by his co-tenants that he just suddenly packed up and left in a hurry, in fact. I was shocked. I tried texting and calling him, but his number was unreachable. This continued for 2 more weeks, and I decided to call his workplace to ask about him. It was then I found out that Joel had actually been fired 3 months back because he had been found stealing artworks from the school and selling them on the black market. I was so shocked, and it was like my brain was finally functioning properly when I went into my art studio and found about 4 pieces of my artworks missing. I didn't know what to do because I could not make a report given our affair, and because I had actually given him a key so he could wait around for me whenever I wasn't there. Those artworks had already been bought and were there for delivery the next week, so I had to start painting again. I worked tirelessly, day and night, to paint all 4 of them before I had to deliver them. I knew they didn't exactly look the same as the original, but I had no choice, so I had them delivered to the owners. So, 2 more months passed, and there was no storm as I had expected, and my buyers loved the painting. Well, of course, they did not know about the originals. Dan and I were still trying for a baby, but what he didn't know was that I was actually the one preventing a baby because while I was sleeping with him and Joel, I had to protect myself against getting pregnant because I didn't want confusion as regards the father of the baby. So, when Joel left, I stopped taking the drugs, but it was still difficult to get pregnant, and I was getting frustrated. One time, Dan started to behave very oddly, and he spent more time outside than he did with me, and that was unusual. At first, I thought it was because of work, but then he hadn't been working in the basement for a while, and when Dan eventually came home, he would be too drunk to hold any conversations with. I became very worried because I couldn't understand why he was behaving like that. The day everything changed from good straight to the worst was that day. That day, I wish I had known about it beforehand, so I could have avoided it. That day, Sonia and Biggie had come to visit me because apparently it had been a while since I went over to their place, given that I had first been busy with Joel, and later was worried about Dan's change in attitude. So, when my friends had decided to come over, I had told Dan before he had wanted to leave the house so he could come back early enough to say hi to them and also eat lunch, and he had just shrugged and left. So when they did arrive, we talked about a lot of stuff, and we fed each other details about our lives that we had missed out on, and of course I removed the parts about Joel. That same morning, my family decided to spring up a surprise visit on me. It had been so long since I visited home because of my work, even though we lived in the same city, and it was only a 2-hour drive to get to my parents' home. I had been so happy to see my parents, and especially my sisters, and of course they knew Sonia and Biggie, so they also exchanged pleasantries, and I had to dash out and get more groceries to cook for everyone. Dan arrived just in time for lunch, and when I had gone to greet him, he had responded tartly, and I guess that everybody noticed, and they kept quiet and started eating. It was awkward for a while until Madeline had started to tell everyone about her last trip, and then everywhere had been filled with laughter at her stories, and everything went back to normal except my husband wasn't exactly laughing. Mom asked about how my work was going, and I told her, and my friends were telling the family that I was just trying to be humble by only giving them bits and pieces, and they had started teasing me and calling me a celebrity. I had laughed and joked along with them, and my mom had turned to Dan and touched his hand affectionately, asking about his work too, and he had just replied with a fine, and because I had noticed the awkwardness starting up again, I had started teasing him while my friends were also supporting me. I was telling them that despite his small, pathetic old tools, he still put them to good work and had some clients, and that he was working on acquiring bigger and better ones to work with. I know that Dan prided himself on his tools that he had first bought with his hard-earned money, and that he had never discussed purchasing any new tools with me, but I just wanted to impress everyone, and I guess that backfired very badly. Dan's mood had changed instantly, and he had dropped his spoon with a loud bang and muttered an "excuse me" before leaving. I knew I had said the wrong thing, and I tried to go after him to apologize, but Dan had turned sharply and shouted at me right there in front of everyone. He had asked me if it was because of his pathetic tools or his non-famous status that made me think it right to cheat on him for months and rub the affair under his nose. I had been so shocked that Dan actually found out about my affair, and I hadn't even said anything to defend myself until he had looked at me as if disgusted by what he saw and told me that our marriage was over. I had started crying and begging him, but he wouldn't even listen, and he just left. After he did, so did my family and friends without uttering a single word to me. It's been 3 hard days of my life, and neither Dan nor my family and friends are speaking to me. Please, guys, I really cannot lose Dan. Please, what do I do? How do I get back my marriage? Update. Hello, Reddit. It's been the hardest 3 months of my life. I'm so drowning, and it's in the pool of my own sin. I've ruined both my life and my marriage altogether, and I feel so awful. I think that heartbreak is smaller compared to the feelings I have right now. My heart feels so heavy. It's like a crushing weight in my chest. No one is speaking to me, and it seems now that everywhere, both online and physically, everyone is condemning me. About my paintings that Joel stole, he was found out and arrested and has been in prison ever since, but not without him confessing and trying to lie that I gave those paintings to him because we were lovers, and I had no choice but to confess that he did steal them from me, but only had access to them in the first place because we were involved. Now my cheating story is out there on every platform, and I'm being vandalized everywhere. Even most of my clients returned the paintings they bought from me and requested a refund, which left me very broke. I mean, I had to sell my workshop and some of the paintings in black markets for very, very cheap prices just to pay off the debts I had. Now I'm very lonely, broken, and without Dan. I don't know what I was really thinking when I decided that the best way to repay Dan's love and kindness was by cheating and also treating him like he was worthless beside my achievements. The so-called achievements are now nothing. All rubbish. I have nothing to me. No husband, no supporting family, no friends, no career. All I do now is cry myself to sleep and wonder how I could have been so stupid as to let things be the way they are. I don't even know what to do with my life anymore. Suddenly, I have no dreams, no hope for what's coming next. The present weighs me down so badly that I dare not hope for the future. The one person that stood by me and believed in me when I was nothing now has left me alone because of my own stupid actions. I cheated on my husband with a liar and a thief who has now ruined everything I've ever worked for. I don't even blame him at all. Had I been wise enough to see through his actions, I wouldn't be in this mess I brought upon myself. All I do now, every day, is cry myself to sleep. I have nothing else to do and no one to go to. It hurts to be me right now. I know you all think I deserve what I got, and honestly, I think so too. I know that Dan will never forgive me for what I did to him, and honestly, if I were him, I wouldn't forgive me either. I really desperately wish that things were different. Maybe now I'd still be famous, positively in the art world, and I may probably be pregnant by now with Dan's baby, and knowing Dan, I know he'd make an amazing father. But that's what everything is now. A wish that can never be real. Update. Hello Reddit, this is my very last post here, and I just have 2 things to say. One would be, don't ever be like me because I can tell you how painful it is being me right now. And 2 would still be, please don't even attempt being like me. Thanks and goodbye.
Handsome neighbor offered to help fix my faucet while my husband was gone. And yeah, I did it. No, it's funny how your life could just change in a twinkle of an eye. I recently did something stupid. I don't even know what came over me. I let my neighbor overstep boundaries and do things he shouldn't have done with me. I gave him permission to step into my house. Oh my, I'm very stupid. I allowed my emotions to get the best of me. I honestly don't know how I got here, but one thing is certain. I totally regret everything now, but I guess it's too late already. I've lost everything already. I'm so ashamed of myself right now. I messed up big time. I don't even know how to tell my story. I'm not proud of what I did. My handsome neighbor offered to help fix my faucet while my husband was gone, and somehow I slept with him. Everything happened so fast that I couldn't even control myself. Now I'm losing my mind because everything went south so fast. My husband ruined my life after finding out that I slept with our neighbor. He took everything from me and made me a laughingstock. My husband divorced me immediately when he found out I had an affair with our neighbor. He left me nothing. He didn't even think about the 5 years we have spent together. He just threw everything out to the wind. I knew he wasn't going to be happy when he found out I cheated on him, but I didn't expect him to react the way he did. I didn't know I married a heartless man. My name is Chloe, and I'm a 29-year-old elementary school teacher. I have been an elementary school teacher for the past 5 years now. The name of my husband is Patrick, and he is a 30-year-old nurse. Patrick and I have been married for the past 5 years now, and I can tell you without mincing any words that Patrick is a good man. He is my God-sent shining armor. Patrick is everything I ever wanted in a man. Although he is not perfect, no one is perfect. I can tell you for a fact that Patrick is almost perfect. That's why everything hurts so much. It doesn't deserve this from me. I know there's no chance in hell that Patrick would forgive me if he ever finds out I cheated on him with our neighbor, and that it wasn't actually a one-time thing. Everything happened so fast that I felt weak. I wish I did things differently. I wouldn't be in this mess right now. I honestly regret everything that happened that day. It feels surreal. So on that particular day, I wanted to a bath, and I discovered my faucet wasn't working. I was running late for work, and I needed to have my bath before leaving. There was no way I was going to head for working smelling like lasagna. So I hurriedly stepped out looking for help. But unfortunately for me, I didn't find any help. So I decided to go back in and make a call for help. But on my way back, I met our handsome neighbor, Rock. Rock is a very handsome man. He has all the physical features every woman would want, and his body was beautifully built. Rock is a fitness coach, so I wasn't surprised he has an amazing body. Rock just recently parked to the building opposite ours. So he stopped me to ask some few questions. I was running late for work, but I decided to spare a few minutes and just chat with him, so it wouldn't seem I was rude or something. After putting Rock through on what he needed, he asked what was wrong and told him my faucet just suddenly stopped working. He asked to take a look if that was okay by me. I honestly wanted to decline, but I didn't have a choice because I had to go be at work early and I was already late. I knew it will take time before help finally arrives, so I reluctantly accepted Rock's offer. I wish I never did, though. That was the genesis of my problems. So we went inside the house, and I took Rock straight to our bathroom. Rock pulled off his clothes and started checking the faucet to see what was wrong. He claimed he didn't want to stain his clothes. Rock's body was a beautiful sight to behold. At that point, I couldn't hold myself anymore. There was this undeniable chemistry between us. That was it, guys. One thing led to another, and I slept with Rock. I felt so ashamed of myself. I couldn't believe I broke my marriage vows. I couldn't even believe I cheated on Patrick, my husband, with our who just parked in barely a week ago. I was so lost for words. I didn't know what to do at that point. The only thing that was running through my head was, what will Patrick do when he finds out I cheated on? I immediately asked Rock to leave and that he should never show himself before me again. But the truth is, I didn't mean what I was saying. Deep down in my heart, I wanted him to stay. So he left, and I hurriedly took my bath and rushed to work. I couldn't concentrate on work all through that day. I kept thinking about Rock and the good time we had together. I was also lost in thought about what Patrick would do if he ever finds out I cheated on him. Patrick has been out of town for work for 3 consecutive months now, so I was lonely, and I let my loneliness get the best of me. My affair with Rock continued, and I couldn't bring myself to stop. Everything was going smoothly, and I was enjoying the undivided attention I was getting from Rock until Patrick returned from his. Trouble started when Patrick returned and didn't find me in our home. I forgot to tell you guys that I actually moved in with Rock in his apartment. So when Patrick returned by 10 p.m. on that fateful day and didn't meet me at our apartment, he called me to ask of my whereabouts, and I lied to him that I was at home. He asked which home, and I told him our home. I was getting annoyed with his questions at this point because he was already running my movie date with Rock. To my greatest surprise, he asked me to stop lying and told me he was at our apartment. At that point, guys, I jumped from Rock's arm. I froze for a few seconds. I immediately ended the call and started thinking of what to do next. I told Rock about my predicament, and he came up with a lie for me, so I rushed to our apartment. When I saw how furious Patrick was, I decided to go with Rock's idea. I lied to Patrick that I was nauseous and just stepped out to the neighborhood for fresh air, and that I knew it was late. That was why I couldn't tell I was outside taking a walk, as I didn't want him to be worried. From the look on Patrick's face, I knew he didn't believe anything I was saying, but he didn't have any proof, so he let the matter go. He told me he trusts me, and he knows I wouldn't do anything to jeopardize the love we have. That word broke me. It was at that point that I really repented for all my wrongdoings. I felt bad for breaking the trust Patrick had in me, and for allowing lust and loneliness take the best of me. I wasn't myself. I wanted to confess so badly, but I was scared. I didn't know how Patrick was going to react. Patrick and I promised each other that we would never cheat under any circumstances. I was even the one that made Patrick promise me he wouldn't cheat on me when he was going on his trip. So we both promised each other we would be faithful to one another. I can't believe I broke that promise. Patrick said he wanted to surprise me, and that was why he arrived without informing me, even though we spoke earlier on the phone. Patrick started suspecting something was wrong with me. According to him, it seems I wasn't happy to see him. Every day he would ask continuously if something was wrong because I was always lost and moody. I wanted to confess, but I didn't have the balls to do that. The thought of losing my marriage scared the shit out of me. I couldn't confess to Patrick about my cheating escape. I knew he wouldn't understand why I cheated. Even I don't understand the reason I cheated. I can't even explain it. Patrick is a one-in-a-lifetime kind of man. Every woman would be so lucky to have him in their lives. I can't believe I ruined everything by sleeping with our neighbor. Patrick made sure he provided everything I needed. Money was never my problem. Even though I work, I hardly spend my money. Patrick is the one that does everything for me. I was only working because of my passion for teaching and children. I love kids so much, they literally melt my heart. Update. Hi guys, I'm back to update you guys on what happened next. I thought everything would just disappear with time, but I guess it is true what they say that nothing can be hidden forever. I thought my secret would be hidden forever, but I was wrong. After blocking Rock on phone calls and all social media and warning him to stay away from me, I thought that was the end of everything, but I was wrong. One day while Patrick and I were enjoying the cool natural breeze on our corridor, a crazy lady stormed up on our property and started making a scene. She started by calling me all sorts of derogatory names, and before I could even say a word, she gave me a dirty slap. At this point, Patrick had to step in. He stood between me and the lady and held me while questioning the lady why she slapped me. The lady told Patrick to stay out of the matter and he would be more pissed if he found out what I did. At this point, I was confused. I didn't think far. I thought it was just an angry lady who was having a bad day transferring her aggression at me. But my heart skipped when I saw Rock heading towards our apartment. Apparently, the lady is Rock's girlfriend. I felt embarrassed that day, guys. I wanted the ground to open so I could just disagree. I can never forget that day. I still remember everything vividly. The lady went on to accuse me of stealing her man and even cohabiting with. She called me a shameless and uncultured woman. Patrick stopped her and told her that maybe there was a mix-up somewhere and that I wasn't capable of such an act. Patrick asked me to say something and defend myself at least. But unfortunately, I couldn't utter a word. The only word that came out of my mouth was sorry. I knelt down and started apologizing to Patrick, and to my greatest surprise, he gave me another dirty slap and went inside. He left me outside with Rock and the crazy angry lady. Rock was finally able to drag his crazy girlfriend away from the house, but not after she had finished raining curses on me. She even wanted to get physical with me, but Rock was able to pull her away just in time. I couldn't believe what was happening. It all felt like a dream to me. The secret I have been trying to hide has finally been exposed. I felt ashamed of myself. At that point, I realized the lust was not worth losing my marriage over. I blamed myself for ruining my marriage with my own hands. I decided to go inside so I could at least explain things to Patrick, but I couldn't open the door. Apparently, Patrick had locked me outside. Worst of it all was that my phone was inside and I couldn't call anyone. I tried calling out to him severally to please open the door so I could at least explain everything to him, but all my pleas went on deaf ears. He refused to open the door, and I actually slept outside that night. The following morning, I woke up to Patrick throwing my clothes in the trash. I tried stopping him, but he sternly warned me not to try anything funny. Patrick threw my clothes outside and asked me to leave his house. I couldn't believe my eyes. It felt like I was having a nightmare. I continued pleading with Patrick to please forgive me, but he took the car and drove off. Before going, he warned me to get my things and get back before he returned, else he would call the cops on me for trespassing. The look on his face says it all. I couldn't even recognize the man talking to me. It felt like I was talking to a complete stranger. Honestly, I wasn't expecting this reaction from Patrick. I knew he would be angry, but why was he treating me like an outcast? Even to the extent of locking me outside and throwing out my clothes in the trash and even threatening to call the cops on me. One was certain. Patrick has changed. He is not the man I married 5 years ago. I mean, didn't he promise for better for worse? Why would he chase me out for just a silly mistake? I was so pissed at Patrick that I started regretting getting married to him in the first place. I didn't know he was this heartless. I picked my clothes and phone from where Patrick had trashed my belongings, so I called an Uber and went to my friend's house. I explained everything to her and she asked me to give Patrick time so that he would come around. I listened to her advice because I know that time is the greatest healer, but the more I tried to convince myself that I did nothing wrong, the more I feel guilty. 3 days later, I got a call that changed everything. It was a call from our lawyer. He asked me to come to his office because he wanted to see me urgently. I went to meet him and I got the biggest shock of my life. Patrick had filed for a divorce. Honestly, I never expected that. I thought it was a prank at first. But when I gave me a pen to sign the papers, it dawned on me that it was definitely not a joke. Of course, I refused to sign the divorce papers. I told him I will have to see Patrick before I sign anything. I was scared at that point, but I had to act tough. My worst fear was finally coming to pass. I can't imagine my life without Patrick. There's no way I would divorce him, I said to myself as I headed to our house. Or should I say our former house? I arrived at our apartment. Luckily for me, the front door was opened. I met Patrick at the house drinking and smoking with a strange lady. I couldn't believe my eyes. Just 3 days after I left, Patrick had moved on. I can't explain how I felt at the moment. It was then I finally understood what Patrick might have felt when he discovered I cheated on him. I felt bad seeing Patrick and that lady. I was so hurt that I started crying. I knelt down and started begging him to forgive me. I asked the strange lady to excuse Patrick and I, but she refused to move an inch. So I begged Patrick to at least follow me outside so we could talk, but he said, I should say anything I have to there or leave if I don't have anything to say. I had to confess my cheating scandal to my husband and his new lover. I didn't have an option. I thought he would forgive me when I told him the truth. But instead, he got more furious when he discovered I usually slept with Rock in our apartment. He pushed me out and asked me to leave and never show my face before him again. He called me all sorts of unprintable names. His new girlfriend joined him to rain curses at me. I left there ashamed of myself and hurt. After trying everything possible to make Patrick change his mind with no results, I finally signed the divorce papers. The divorce proceedings are another phase entirely. I hated the entire process. It made me sick, but I didn't have an option. I had to appear in court for every hearing. And finally, Patrick and I got divorced. That was the worst day of my entire life. I never imagined Patrick and I would ever get divorced when we got married in San Francisco 5 years ago. That is one of my best memories till date. I can't believe I ruined that because I couldn't keep myself together. I know there was no way I would ever find a man like Patrick ever again. He was too good to be real. Honestly, I regret everything I did. I regret cheating on my husband. How I wish I could turn back the hands of time. I would have done things differently. I would have just left for work without showering on that fateful day, or I would have declined Rock's request of helping me to fix my faucet, or I could have controlled myself and not fall for Rock's charm. I was just thinking of things I could have done differently, but didn't. My life became a mess after the divorce. Everything wasn't making sense again. I didn't know where to start. I was completely lost. Patrick made sure I didn't get a penny from him. Not that I wanted his money, though. He didn't allow me to take all the valuable things he ever bought for me. He didn't even allow me to take the car he bought for me on my birthday 3 years ago. I was jumping from one Uber to another. My salary was barely enough. It was after the divorce that I knew the value of what I had. I wasn't really spending my salary on anything. I spent my salary mostly on junks. Patrick was the one that was running the house with his money. He paid all the bills. So it was hard for me to adjust to paying my own bills after having someone do that for me for the past 5 years now. I struggle with almost everything. Bills were piling up and I couldn't afford to pay. Worst of all is that I had no savings. Patrick stopped footing my dad's medical bills. My dad has been sick for a while now, and Patrick solely took the responsibility of catering for his medication. After our divorce, Patrick stopped doing all that. All the burden was now on me. The medications were expensive. I didn't even know it was this expensive because Patrick never told me anything about it. He just took the bills from the doctor and was paying for it every month. He even stopped sending my parents upkeep money like he always does every month. I never knew Patrick was this heartless, though. How could he stop paying my dad medication bills because we are divorced and he knew I couldn't afford it? Doesn't he have a little human sympathy? All this was what was running through my mind. I was honestly disappointed in him, but I don't blame him. I would have done the same if I was in his shoes. Everything was my fault, and I take full responsibility for that. I became homeless after my friend was transferred to another state and she relocated fully there. I was chased out of the apartment because I could not afford to pay for rent. I became homeless. Everything happened in a twinkle of an eye. It still baffles me to understand how I went from living in a comfortable apartment to squatting with my friend and now being homeless. Out of desperation, I decided to go visit Rock to see if we could continue from where we stopped, or if he could assist me with some money, or maybe I could squat with him for a few days. I arrived at Rock's apartment with full hope. I thought everything he would definitely ask me to come to stay with him since I was divorced now and there was no obstacle. But to my greatest surprise, Rock told me I couldn't stay at his place and that he has moved on and I should do the same. I was flabbergasted. I couldn't believe my ears. I asked him for money and he told me he didn't have any money because his rich girlfriend that used to give him broke up with him thanks to me, and he is trying to woo her back and that he can't risk me ruining things for him any longer. Apparently, the crazy lady is filthy rich, and she was the one sponsoring Rock's extravagant lifestyle. Now I understand why he didn't do anything when the crazy lady was attacking me. Rock refused to assist me, instead he sent me away. I felt bad for myself. I can't even believe I ruined my marriage because of someone like Rock. How did I bring myself to cheat on a decent man who was earning an honest living with a man who could not feed himself, but depends on one entitled, spoiled rich lady for his daily meal? It was then it dawned on me that Rock was also using me too. I was the one paying for food and everything all through the time we were having an affair. He always claimed his cards were not working every damn time. I was footing his bills with the money Patrick was sending to me. How foolish of me. Rock masterminded everything, and unfortunately I fell for his tricks. I decided to move on with my life, but it wasn't really easy. But I started building my life from all over again. I started staying with my high school friend Charlotte, who is a baker. I told her my ordeal. She had pity on me and offered me her place to stay. While staying with her, I started assisting her in her store and also started learning how to bake. Baking became therapeutic for me. Slowly, I'm beginning to forgive myself for ruining my life with my own hands and for hurting the man that loved me unconditionally. I still feel bad for everything, and I still cry myself to bed every night. No day passes by without me feeling sorry for Patrick. I know he doesn't deserve what I put him through. Deep down, I still hope he will forgive me, and we can still come back together because I honestly don't picture my life with anyone else apart from Patrick. That is my story, guys. I hope everyone, especially ladies, gets to read my story and hopefully learn something from it. Not all the glitters are gold. Don't hurt a good man because you feel you found someone better. I hope we all learn to stay faithful in our marriage so we don't end up like me.